So first of all, I want to say thank you to Dr. Wallis Tinnie and Mr. Victor Norfus for agreeing to present tonight. Before we begin, I just want to go over a couple of house rules. Most importantly, I think it's important that everybody mute yourself unless you are the one of the speakers. Otherwise, please stay muted so that there won't be any background noise or distraction during the presentation. And if you have a lot going on where you are, I do recommend that you turn off your camera just so that it's not distracting to everybody else. The next most important thing is to lead with kindness, respect, and courtesy, especially in the chat. When we get to the Q&A section, we encourage you to ask questions. We just ask that you stay on topic. And lastly, we're asking you to just do away with all distractions for the next hour and give your undivided attention to our esteemed guests. Most importantly, we're very happy that everyone is here. The first thing I want to do is read Dr. Wallis Tinnie's bio, and then after that, I'll read Mr. Norfus's. Dr. Wallis Tinnie, granddaughter of the late Seminole Lawrence Eler Jones Ham, is a native of West Palm Beach, Florida. Dr. Tinnie's grandmother, Florence, left her native home in the village of Miccosukee on the edge of Tallahassee, Florida, to go to Tampa, Florida. Later, she married James Ham and went to West Palm Beach with her husband in the second decade of the 20th century. Their union included 7 children, one of whom was Dr. Tinnie's father. Dr. Tinnie has a Bachelor of Arts degree from Florida A&M University, a Master of Arts from the University of Florida, and a Doctor of Philosophy from the University of Iowa. Excuse me one second. Dr. Tinnie serves as president of Florida Black Historical Research Project, Inc., a Florida nonprofit organization founded by her late cousin, Issa Ham Bryant, a Seminole Maroon descendant who was one of the driving forces behind the reclamation of Waxahachie River Park as a battlefield site in Jupiter, Florida. Dr. Tinnie is a retired college professor and former protocol officer of the city of Miami. As a longtime cultural programmer, she was one of the chief organizers of Miami's annual Pan-African Book Fest and Cultural Conference, spearheaded by the African American Caribbean Cultural Arts Commission, which she co-founded. As president of Florida Black Historical Research Project, Inc., Dr. Tinnie has worked diligently with the help of family members and others for the last 15 years to continue the work of honoring the sacred site of her ancestors, work begun by her cousin, Seminole Maroon descendant, Issa Ham Bryant. And tonight, Dr. Tinnie's presentation is entitled Chachi's Village, Seminole Maroon Unity and the Quest for Historical Truth. And here's a little blurb about that. In the case of the Seminole Wars, a wealth of emerging information that might have been previously hidden, forgotten, denied, ignored, misrepresented, or misunderstood not only adds to our knowledge, but even more importantly, affects how we interpret what we learn. What we think we know is based on our cultural presumptions about what is important and why. This presentation questions many of the accepted modes for interpreting and presenting Seminole Wars history, suggesting representing this history through the perspectives, purposes, and priorities of history in the Seminole Maroon experience. And that is just a little bit about Dr. Wallis Tinnie. And Mr. Norfus, better known as Brother Victor Norfus, is Victor Durrell Norfus's Masonic reference title. He is a past master, and this is his religious reference title for baptisms in public or church. Victor Durrell Norfus, age 60, is the 7th child of 12. He was born in 1963 on Martin Luther King Boulevard in Boynton Beach, Florida. He has been married to his wife, Marcia, who is from Chicago, for 35 years. They met at Burger King while they were both attending Florida A&M University in Tallahassee, Florida. He has 2 sons. Victor Ray is a teacher, preacher, musician who lives in Ohio, and has a church and is a music teacher. Alexander is a cook. He lives in West Palm Beach, Florida. Mr. Victor Norfus is the descendant of the Timucua Seminole Indians, who were captured during the First Seminole War of 1818 near Tallahassee. They were captured by Creek Indian warriors and enslaved by white Georgia soldiers. They were enslaved on Georgia plantations until the Civil War. They moved back to Florida in 1918. Their descendants celebrated 100 years of freedom in 2018. In 1963, Victor's uncles and aunts had stores, restaurants, and nightclubs that catered to the community. The Meeks family was one of the first to move to the area in the 1890s. They interacted with the Seminoles, buying furniture and clothing in front of Victor's family home. The historic home is still standing. The Meeks founded and attended 3 churches. In 1892, they founded St. Paul's African Methodist Episcopal, 1907, St. John's Missionary Baptist, and in 1924, St. Cuthbert's Episcopal Church. Victor joined St. John's Missionary Baptist Church at the age of 12. Boynton Head Start was founded in 1968 by Victor's grandmother, Juanita Settles Meeks. She taught there along with Lena Reming. Victor went to Poinciana Elementary, also known as Boynton Colored School. His mother, Dr. Martha Meeks Light, was Victor's kindergarten teacher. It was called Boynton Colored School, and his mother attended the school in the 1940s as well. In 1980, Victor graduated from high school and joined the United States Air Force as an honor guardsman in the Special Forces. After the military, he went on to graduate from Florida A&M University. He is the grandson of the early pioneer George Washington and Juanita Settles Meeks. His great-grandparents were Alan and Ellen Meeks. They were both freed together after the Civil War. They were both 6 at the time. They never left each other. At age 18, they married and they died in Boynton Beach together, free and happy. Mr. Victor has been retired for 10 years. From 1993 to 2003, Brother Victor Norfus has served on the Community Relations Board, Parks and Recreation Board, Historic Preservation Boards for the city of Boynton Beach, Florida. He's been a member of the International Mason PM, American Legion, and Kappa Alpha Psi. He served on the church's Baptism Committee, Hospitality Committee, and Finance Committee for St. John's Missionary Baptist Church. He is a member of the Boynton Historical Society, Heart of Boynton Community Black Historian, and he writes fiction and nonfiction poems, songs, and short stories. In 2023, he received $100,000 from the Mellon Unity Grant for Florida Black Seminole History, for a Black Florida historic Seminole history book entitled Foundations of Faith, which is based on the 3 churches. And so without further ado, I'll hand it over to Dr. Wallis.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Wendy. I'm so pleased to be here this evening. I really feel it's such an honor for your inaugural program to be the guest speaker. And I want you to know how much I appreciate your inviting me and making me a part of this special evening. I am kind of waiting for you to put that share thing on so that I can put.
I just did. I just made you the host.
Okay. Well, okay.
You see it? Yeah, you're officially the host now.
I don't. Oh, I see. Oh, that's not the share, is it? No. No, that's not it. I don't see it. Wherever you share it.
Yeah, you should be able to share your screen. Does it say share screen?
Go back to where? Just click this out. No. Go back to where here? Share.
If you tap on the screen at the bottom, a menu pops up. You scroll it to the left and you'll see share.
They can see.
Are you able to see it? There you go.
Can you see it?
It's coming on right now. It's buffering, but yeah, it's about to come up.
Ah, okay.
Over here. Yeah, yeah, click. Yeah. All right, everyone. I don't know. We'll work with this as the evening goes on. I'm sorry for the delay. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. And
Very
before we get started, I just want to say Dr. Wallace provided some reading material, some recommended books, so you can go into the chat and take down those recommendations.
Thank you. I'd like to open this evening by sharing a short poem I wrote a few years back. The poem is inspired by Langston Hughes's poem, Cross, in which Hughes's persona laments being an interracial child. The poem's title is Indivisible, a Florida Legacy. The birth record of Big Mama, my mother's mother, whose father was born a free white black man in North Carolina, mumbles something about her being a yellow black woman. The birth scroll of my father's mother, Grandma Florence, born in a Miccosukee village near Tallahassee, clearly states that she was a black red woman. My papers just scream and scream maroon. That poem, I think, I open with this personal poem, which most Afro-Indigenous Americans can probably identify with, because I want to discuss the Maroon experience as a kind of case study in the unthinkable and the unthought. I have selected the title Chachi's Village, Seminole Maroon Unity and the Quest for Historical Truth. I selected that title because of several reasons. And one of the reasons is that I have, the whole idea of the Seminole, the so-called Black Seminole experience is an American phenomenon. In other words, it's the kind of thing that everybody, says it, but we shouldn't have to go around referring to ourselves as Black Seminoles unless people refer to themselves as white Seminoles. And so the whole idea of looking at Chachi's Village, a place in West Palm Beach, and in the context of our own quest for historical truth and for the ability to think about and to have people think about our past and our future as Afro-Indigenous uh, uh, people, really. All of us, most people in America probably have indigenous ancestry by this time, but that's another issue. We are lucky because we have indigenous ancestry from Africa and from America. So we're doubly blessed. At any rate, I have divided the talk this evening into 3 broad categories: connecting the dots in our unthought historical erasure, monitoring the way we tell our stories, and our duty to our ancestors and future generations. Let's connect some dots. Increasingly, we are learning from our respected scholars that there is more information hidden in plain sight that continues to receive little attention in the academy and among the general public as related to the Seminole Maroon experience. Much of this is due to systemic racism, which in fact clouds the ability to see certain facts right before our very eyes. Still, the info is being aired, although it will take some time for some of the formally accepted facts to be roundly rejected as patently absurd, such as being called a Black Seminole, which is redundant to say the least. Recently, I received a note from my mentor, Dr. Heriberto Dixon, who was keynote lecturer for the opening of the Indivisible traveling exhibit honoring the untold story of Afro-Indigeneity, produced by the Smithsonian American Indian Museum. Dr. Dixon shared a letter he received from the historian Dale Cox, author of Fort at Prospect Bluff, the British post on the Apalachicola River, and the Battle of Negro Fort, which is another issue, Negro Fort. Let me read an excerpt from the letter. This is what he wrote to Dr. Dixon. Let me mention first the Revolutionary era. While studying a British march across North Florida and today's Southwest Georgia that took place in 1778, Mr. Cox says, I was looking for more information on the well-known and oft-published Stuart Purcell map. That was drawn during the expedition. This map shows the old Pensacola St. Augustine Road followed by the British, as well as abandoned Spanish mission sites, Native American towns, etc. He says, I was surprised to find reference made in some of the documents to a second secret map that was prepared at the same time. I finally located this record, much more detailed map, and it clearly was a military or secret version of the well-known 1778 map that has been published in numerous books and articles. He says, I was surprised to find that near the forks of the Chattahoochee and Flint rivers on the border of Florida, it shows a Negro town that does not appear on the published version. I don't know, it's circled there on the map, as you can see, Negro Town. Great. This is really good. I'm saying this is good because of the person who did it did an excellent job. Clearly, the British did not want this town and its location to become known to the Americans in Georgia. I'm enclosing a copy of that portion of the map for your interest. This new documentation pushes the presence of a Maroon town in the Apalachicola River Valley back more than 35 years before the War of 1812 to at least the time of the American Revolution. Because it appears to be independent from any of the newly established Seminole towns in the area, it also challenges the accepted theory that Maroons arrived in the Florida borderlands to seek shelter with the Seminoles, who were themselves arriving during the British occupation of Florida, 1763 to 1783. They were clearly settled in significant numbers in at least one community within 3 years of the start of the American Revolution. He continues, the question in my mind is, could they have been there before? The story about Maroons in the Apalachicola, Chattahoochee Flint Valley, as offered in the Prospect Bluff Negro Fort National Landmark nomination documentation, is that the ones already in the valley before the arrival of the British in 1814 migrated down from the Great Bend area of the Chattahoochee River, the Coweta. This clearly disproves that theory by showing that there were Maroons in significant numbers living free on the lower river system on their own and not under the protection of the Coweta chiefs. Could this explain the enmity between McIntosh, the Coweta war chief, and the Maroons at Prospect Bluff in 1816? That's the end of the letter of what he said. I know what you are thinking, though. How could Dale Cox, after doing all of that research on Prospect Bluff and the so-called Negro Fort, not question what he calls the accepted theory that Maroons arrived in the Florida borderlands to seek shelter with the Seminoles? We all know that the Maroons and Seminoles are one and the same. It seems obvious today. It seems obvious today that the word Seminole refers to a people, not one tribe. We all know that there was never an Indian tribe called Seminole. This Creek word in English is a corruption of a Spanish word, cimarron, and it was originally applied by the Spanish to people who freed themselves from enslavement to live in the wilderness. It seems very likely that by the time of the destruction of the fort at Prospect Bluff, with the massacre of 300 people, the Black presence in that area was of long standing. One very interesting unthought fact is also the presence in that region of the Chichimecos of northern Mexico, who seem to have been hired as slavers. Let's connect some dots. I'd like for you to I want to give you the opportunity to check out okay. This? This is forward? Okay. All right, as you may all know, the Negro Fort, as they call it, at Prospect Bluff, in North Florida, near the Florida-Georgia border, near Tallahassee, in that area. This fort was destroyed when a shot was fired into the gun barrel, and it caused unknown number of deaths, but they say around 300. But it was a terrible thing. But at any rate, let's connect the dots. An entry in the Enciclopedia de los Municipios de Mexico, or the Encyclopedia of Mexican Towns, indicates that the city of Guadalupe, Mexico, was founded in the pre-Hispanic epoch by, and I quote, savages called negritos. These negritos, or black people, fought the Spanish conquerors in the 16th century. They were many in number, with black skin and black coarse hair, according to the encyclopedia. The encyclopedia also describes the inhabitants of the city of Machuala, founded in 1591. In fact, there were two settlements where the Chichimecas, called negritos, lived. They are described as rustic, lovers of colors, and in some instances, they're called extremely cruel. The men walked about nude, according to the description, and the women only wore covers of deer skin. Historian John Lee Williams in the territory of Florida mentions that in 1584, the Chichimecas, or Macos, or Mecas, I'm not sure which one, or Negritos, joined in allegiance with the Spanish, so that Spanish authorities were acknowledged as far west as the Mississippi. These Negritos had engaged in war with the Spanish authorities for over 50 years, and it is said that they never surrendered. Now, the Chichimecos in South Carolina, the Yamasee, come face to face with one another. What is the significance of their stories, of their meeting? We know that the Chichimecos are said to have been slavers, and it is also said that the Yamasee were slavers. But we do know that both are considered as black-skinned Indians. Indeed, we do know, according to M.M. Cohen, the historian, in an account, 1836 account, Notices of Florida and the Campaigns, he says that the original Black Indians of Florida were the Yamasees, whom he describes as remarkably Black people who were very numerous in Florida, perhaps as much so as in Mexico. Here are some quotes from Cohen's accounts of these early Florida Indians. The Aquawaha tribe, who are of a deeper shade than the Seminoles, are descendants of this conquered race, the Yamasee. The chief of the Aquawaha, Yabaago, who was killed by General Shelton in the campaign of 36, was very dark. Under King Payne, grandfather of Micanopy, the present chief, the Seminoles invaded and achieved the conquest of the territories they now occupied. King Paine lived to near 100 years of age and married a Yamasee woman by whom he had the late Chief Paine, who bore in the darkness of his complexion a proof of his Yamasee descent. The greater part of East Florida appears to have been originally in possession of the Yamasees, he further says, a powerful people who not only occupied this province, but spread themselves over Georgia and into the limits of South Carolina. Some of the tribes resided within the present limits of that state in and about Beaufort and Savannah River, and also the Sea Islands. As I said, Coens, who is writing this in 1836, cites a story among Creek legends about the beauty of the Yamasee women, a beautiful race of Indians whose women were called daughters of the sun, resided amidst the recesses of the great Okefenokee wilderness, where they enjoyed perpetual felicity inaccessible to human approach. William Bartram is said to have conjectured that this fable about the daughters of the sun took rise from a fugitive remnant of the Yamasees, who did find refuge in this swamp, Okefenokee. In Black Society in Spanish Florida, Jane Landers offers linguistic evidence that 17th and 18th century Florida missionaries were probably working with many Black Native Americans. Landers questions a Franciscan missionary's reference to Indians as Indios Bozales, a term Landers says is reserved for unacculturated Africans. Missionaries also refer to Christianized Indians as Indios Ladinos, a term Landers says normally used for Christians of African descent who had learned Spanish. It is apparent that these people, the Indios Bozales and the Indios Ladinos, were in fact Black Indians, since Landers said that the terms Bozales and Indios referred to Africans. Let's think about how we talk about ourselves. The language we use to talk about the history, that the language we find in history and the language we ourselves use to talk about ourselves. I have several examples here on the PowerPoint. The first one, and the examples are in red. Well, actually, okay, the first one, the Sarasota or Runaway Negro Plantations, Tampa Bay's first Black community, 1812 to 1821, is the title of Cantor Brown Jr.'s article on the subject of self-liberation by enslaved Africans. Now, the term I have the biggest trouble with in that is the term runaway Negro, because one of the things that we're all trying to look at is how we deal with the colonized language that we have to use to write about ourselves. We have to learn, we have to begin to find other ways to express positive situations which the language has deemed in language of negativity. Runaway Negro is a negative expression. And so people are now, of course, using terms like self-liberators, self free blacks, or whatever you want to use. Runaway is something that children do. It is not a phrase that you would apply to an adult who courageously extricates himself from the forced labor camps that ran America during that time. Another example is from the book The Indian Slave Trade by Alan Gallay. Carolina also began to heed the proprietor's suggestions to employ Indians to capture runaway slaves. The thing here again is runaway and slave. One of the things that everybody thinks that because the commercial people who made money off enslavement of other people and call them, in fact, slaves, that we feel obliged to do the same thing, because the people will tell you, well, they were slaves. Well, they were enslaved, but they were Africans, they were men, women, they were not slaves. They were slaves only in the sense that the commercial society, the capitalistic society, called them slaves. So one of the things that we want to do is to get away from using slave to describe the people who were enslaved in the forced labor camps of America. And we need to begin that today. In the second thing, this sentence, the Indians had the dual purpose of protecting the slave owner's investment and of preventing escaped Africans, I think it says, because I can't see this thing is over my writing. But I think that's what it says. Let me see, I guess I can look on my own paper. Oh, I can't, he can't, his is closed too. Now I have it here. I don't know. Here, the so-called runaways are called escaped Africans, and the Indians are called Amerindians. But his conversion is very short-lived, because in the very next sentence, he says, escaped slaves who lived outside government authority, known as Maroons, had the potential to incite enslaved Indians and Africans to destroy the colony. So that it seems that he was going back and forth with the idea of using Africans to refer to the enslaved people instead of the word slave, but he did not sustain it. But we have to learn how to sustain to refrain from using. It's going to take a while, but I think we can do it. We can begin to do what we have to do in that respect. At any rate, it is our responsibility to begin to, it is our responsibility to begin to set the record straight about how we want our stories told and how we want to be, what we want, what we are, who we are, and how we are to be referred to in the record. But we need to tell our own stories. And that is that is our responsibility, to research and begin to tell our own stories in this while we have to use the colonized language. Dale Cox also writes of two groups of African Americans near Mariana in Northwest Florida who have family traditions that their ancestors were once free, married to Seminole Indians, and lived in a Black people's fort, but that it was blown up with a bomb and that they were sent into slavery. Cox says the names of their ancestors matched the names of tribal citizens given in a federal suit filed by Econ Chati Miko after a group of slave stealers entered the reserves, beat him, and kidnapped 16 men, women, and children. The same thing happened on Yellow Hair's Reserve, which was also occupied by Vakapa Chasi, called the Mulatto King by the whites. He is specifically mentioned as a leader at Prospect Bluff by Nichols. These two families, says Dale Cox, are without a doubt descended from kidnapped Black Seminoles, Maroons, and based on their oral traditions, very likely represent intact communities of Negro Fort survivors still living in Northwest Florida. So that we now, this is one of our stories that I am talking about, stories hidden in plain view. Finally, we come to Chachi and his village. Going the wrong way on this. Chachi's village, if you see on the map that you have before you, this is Chachi's village is in West Palm Beach, Florida, on Australian Avenue and 36th Street. It's right at a park called Sunset Park. That's what we're calling it in that area. We're going to put up a commemorative plaque there. But the area of Chachi's village was somewhere east of I-95, somewhere near 12th Street, which is Palm Beach Lakes Boulevard, between Palm Beach Lakes Boulevard and 36th and 45th Street, somewhere between there, between Australian and I-95. So somewhere between in that area was Chachi's village, because we have several different descriptions of the village. So the actual location of the sacred site of Chachi's village, we're not actually positively sure of the specific location, but we do know that it is in that particular area. And thank you, Michelle. It's clearer now. My helper here has made it clearer so that you can see where it has been marked, the village in the area of where Lake Worth is, and that is in the area of West Palm Beach. And you can see there's water there on both maps. There's more water over here, so it could actually be, it could actually be a little even further north of that, but you don't think so? I don't know, but no, don't put it back.
Go back. Go back.
Oh, okay.
Go back.
All right. No, that's fine. That's fine. So this is the second map. So that on the second map, you can see that it does seem to be further north on the second map. So we're not exactly sure where the village was, but we're going to commemorate that village at any rate. We're going to pay tribute to those people and that time. It is our responsibility to do this. It was a 19th century Native American settlement, and it was there, and in the 1830s and 40s, we know it was there around the 1830s and 40s, And what happened there was the Chachi was a we're not sure of what he was. They called his wife Polly a mixed race, that she was mixed with Spanish. We're not sure if he was of what, whether he was Seminole or what, because they called, by that time they were beginning to call all of the Native Americans in Florida Seminoles, and of course they were not. And it's a possibility that he was Yamasee, but we are not sure about that either. But at any rate, the military came and they found him up near Boynton Beach, in the area of Boynton Beach, and it is my understanding that they forced him, by killing some of the Native Americans, to reveal where his village was. They burned the village, burned the crops, burned everything, and then he was used as an interpreter or something like that. And according to legend, or to the people, many of the uh, Seminole people, uh, did not like him because of the fact that they thought he was a turncoat of sorts. At any rate, we're going to be looking at that in January further, a little more depth to that. So, all right.
Oh,
This is I'm sorry, I'm also admitting people. All right, this is the calendar for our event in January, which we have every January during the Dr. Martin Luther King weekend. We pay tribute, we honor our ancestors, and we commemorate the struggle that they had, where their villages were at the Loxahatchee River Park, which is now called Loxahatchee River Battlefield Park. And on Sunday, January 14th, we will be doing our annual spiritual remembrance. And the day before that, on Saturday, we will do the commemoration, we will do the uh, memorial service to honor Chachi's village. And we will also celebrate with Boynton Beach honoring their 100-year anniversary. And we are going to also be taking a tour there of the Seminole sites in the Boynton Beach area on Saturday, January 13th. Is that it? Oh, okay.
okay. So where my segue comes in.
All right, now, okay, thank you. Okay, okay, thank you so much. I am so sorry I was really little, I'm not very good at all of these technical things, but I appreciate your patience and your staying with me throughout that little thing. But what I was trying to do was to focus in on the idea of the unthought and the unthinkable, which is in America, it is unthinkable. It is still unthinkable to have a Black Indian in 2023, which is so absolutely ridiculous. When all these people saw these people, I mean, it's just crazy. It's the craziest thing. But and people don't realize that it is, and there are too many people. One of the reasons that I had in my talk that I wanted to talk about Seminole unity is that I've heard too many people who are in our, some people are, well, Black people didn't come over here, you know, we're never enslaved. We were always here. And then you have people who, I mean, there are all kinds of uh, uh, incredible kinds of statements being made because people want to be recognized for who they are. And it's totally understandable. But I don't think that we will be able to accomplish anything unless we unify ourselves as Seminoles and as Native American, Afro, uh, indigenous people. We have got to stay together. We cannot fight over small issues that have nothing to do with our ancestors and our future generations. And this is really a very important message. I hope that we will begin to pass around to our people, that we must not bicker about things that are kind of unrealistic. I mean, to say that that we didn't come, that we were not enslaved is ridiculous. The Native Americans were enslaved, African Americans were enslaved, white people were enslaved. This place lies about everything. There were at the end of slavery, you had so many white people enslaved that there is a count. I can show you a record where at least they claim, this is not my record, but at least 200,000 of them left the South and went to the Midwest. And that's why you cannot even get a census for that time period, because they claim that they burned, but that all those people who were white people enslaved, because that's who they were. And 10 years before that Emancipation Proclamation, if your grandmother was Black, you could be a white person legally all over this country. So that all of this is ridiculous. So we cannot go around. I think we need to see ourselves as one people and begin to stop this in-house fighting about the history, because the history is the history. Now I introduce you to Victor from Boynton, who will talk to you about our event that will take place in Boynton and his history. And thank you so much. Oh, and I have 3 books that Wendy mentioned in the chat, that she put in the chat: The Yamasee Indians from Florida to South Carolina, The Fort at Prospect Bluff by Dale Cox, the man I was quoting, and The Indian Slave Trade by Alan Gallay. And this is the Indian slave trade. I don't know if you can see it. The Fort at Prospect Bluff, and the Yamasee Indians from Florida to South Carolina. I think those books are worth, and of course, our favorite book, Exiles of Florida by Joshua Giddens, we always recommend for those of you who love to read. Thank you. Thank you, Victor.
All right.
Ready, Jeanette.
Okay, am I to start? Or can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start then. My name is Brother Victor Norfus. I'm from Boynton Beach, Florida. My descendants are also Seminole descendants. And I've been to a couple of your tours and quite a few events. Start off by saying I did know Issa, and we were friends. we had done a different project, a family reunion project for Palm Beach County. And that's when he told me about the Seminole project that he was working on. But to make a long story short, I told him that if he got it working on that end, I'd work on it on this end account. So this year, we were able to get a grant for Unity. It was a Mellon grant for the Unity project. And one of the issues that was done is in 1923, there was an ordinance passed that segregated Blacks, Indians, and whites from the city. But to go back a few years, in 1920, it was half Black, it was half white. The Blacks and the whites and the Indians got together, created the city. A white mayor was nominated. 3 years later, the whole city was white except for a small section. So that was Ordinance 36. What I had wanted to do was to give you a tour of our city. And I was listening to Tinnie, I was like, boy, this is a history lesson, but I got a few things to add. From our records, and first of all, Australian Avenue is where my aunt lives, Katie Butler. So she lives only about 15 blocks from where the actual park is going to be dedicated. My uncle was the one that started the Black College, and I guess he knew Gwen Ferguson, that might be your cousin, and somehow they knew each other, but I never met any of these individuals. I only met Issa. But as far as the Chachi Village, it's pretty much where, just where the mall is, which is right by 95. And then if you go downtown, where downtown West Palm is, that's Chachi's Landing. So basically what happened, and she was pretty much accurate, when the Seminole War broke out, they built Military Trail. And Chachi's village was discovered because they built Military Trail and they were trapped in. And I'm from Boynton Beach. So at that time, the entire Intercoastal was just one big lake. And the southern end of lake was where Boynton Beach is right now. So I was trying to let her understand that a lot of significance was when they went down to capture the hostile Indians, that was in Boynton Beach. So what happened was he did do a lot of stuff like that, and the people within his tribe turned on him because they didn't give him permission to help the army. But the army was like, you know, if you don't, we're going to burn your village. So the irony is his village did survive, but everybody deserted. And then when the army came back and they saw nobody was there, they burned everything to the ground. Okay. So that's the significance and the link between Chachi Village and Boynton. Now, the history in Boynton with the Seminoles is that they had Indian mounds. We have a Boynton Canal, and it basically went all the way down to Lake Worth and then over to the beach. So if you followed the canal straight east, you would have seen a large Yaga Indian mound about 1,000 years old on the beach. And then when you come down toward Boynton, where 95 is right now by the canal, you would have seen another large Yaga mound of shells. And there still exist out west in Boynton. Follow the canal. So they're usually on the southern side of that canal. But basically what happened was the city came in, they moved the Indians out, took the mounds and turned them into roads. And they took all the shells, and that's how they started the first roads in Boynton. And the significance of the cemetery is that the original cemetery was downtown, believe it or not, in Boynton. They simply moved the headstones to the Seminole Cemetery, which was Barton Cemetery now. And so everybody started burying their dead in the old Black Seminole Cemetery. And then they turned it into the city dump, 100%. And so, of course, the Seminoles are on one side where 95 is, and the blacks were on the other side near Federal Highway, and the junkyard was right in the middle. And so the Seminoles moved further west. And so what I had asked, or I was hoping, was that when you guys come down here, you would do some type of ceremony for that cemetery, because the Unity Project is not just blacks. Okay, there were Seminoles here, and there were Jews here. Okay, they were all not allowed downtown. So even though it didn't say blacks, Indians, Jews, it said blacks, but all of them lived in the colored town, and none of them could live in the white town. So we had a lot of Indians here. And so there's also a place called Mission Park, where the Seminoles actually came from the park and went to the downtown Martin Luther King Boulevard and set up their little shop, and they sold the furniture and the pelts and the clothes, and pretty much across from my aunt, who is also Black Seminole, who founded the St. Cuthbert Church. So I wanted to show you that location because we used to have a club there called the Intercontinental Club, which was run by my family cousins, my uncles. And so they were Bahamian Seminoles. And so we were very industrious people. We helped found churches. My grandmother founded the Eastern Star. I'm a Mason myself. So we're very active in the community. And this Unity Project came about. We actually celebrated 100 years ago in 2020. This is the beginning of the segregation in 1924. So that's why the whole year we're going to have different activities, and you guys are the first ones. So our city is going to do a proclamation and present it to you, welcome you, the Native Americans, back to the city. We have Black Seminoles from the Andros Islands that want to meet you. Okay, we have some Seminoles, my family as well, that are very interested in meeting the people from Mexico, because it seems like when we got captured, they ran. And it was pretty much the same place. And when she says Tallahassee and Miccosukee, well, that's where some of my relatives are, in Miccosukee and Tallahassee. So there's a lot of connection across, the Caribbean, but everybody tends to want to come home to Florida, not just for this. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff I could go over, but myself, I've always done seminars for the Loxahatchee Wildlife Reserve, the Black Seminole Seminar. I have a document here. And one of the things that she mentioned was, what is a Black Seminole? And one of the things I stated is that it means frontiersman, outcast, runaway, wild one. It did not differentiate by race. Okay, African, Indians, and whites. She is correct. There were whites that were enslaved and ran away with the Indians and the blacks, and they lived in Florida. But that's basically racism creeping into our society, creeping into our language, creeping into our thoughts. And one of the things I say is no one calls Osceola a white Seminole, but his father was white. And one of the things that people don't remember is that Osceola married a Haitian-free Black woman. Her name was Chichoda, or Morning Dew, and it was up by Jacksonville. And when he left, they invaded it, killed her, took his children as slaves. And so in history books, they say this Indian was running around marauding and burning up plantations in Georgia and Louisiana, but he was looking for his children, which he never found. And so they don't mention that he was actually married to a Haitian Black woman who was queen. And that's what happened, was everybody started running to her village to be free, and they couldn't have that. So there's a lot of history I would love to share with you, but right now I would love for you guys to come down here to Boynton Beach and meet our citizens, and we can meet you. And this is the beginning of our Unity Project. And so we're gonna have food for you, whether you like Bahamian food or good old country Georgia food, or good old Haitian food, or good old Jamaican food. We got it all down here. So I'm looking forward to seeing you guys here. And I kind of stick with the 15 minutes. Miss Winnie goes and goes and goes and goes, but I'm going to try and stick with the 15 minutes. So I am a writer. When I wrote The Foundations of Faith, those were the three churches that I lived within. So you can imagine St. Paul on one side, St. Cuthbert on the other side, and St. John in the middle. And so all my aunts and uncles, we went to all three churches because we didn't have a pastor every Sunday. So one Sunday we go to St. Paul, another Sunday we go to St. Cuthbert, another Sunday we go to St. John, until eventually we got our own pastor, but St. Cuthbert never got a pastor. It's a small Bahamian Seminole church, very Episcopal, too many incense, real wine, and very Bahamian. So the difference in the churches are the difference in the families. And although we are all Seminole, there's a difference in my aunt who is married a Bahamian. Okay, there's a difference in ourselves who married Africans who ran the train. And that's one of the things, the area that I'm showing you, our family owned it. Okay, and when they created Boynton Color Town, they moved it on our property because that's where the former freedmen lived. And so they couldn't really take our property, so they moved everybody else onto our property. And so, that's how we became, very active in our city and very active in the nation and very active in Florida. Palm
Okay,
Beach County needs unity.
Victor.
And this is just a start.
Victor, do you want
Yes.
to give some time? We won't have some time for questions. If you
Sure.
have anybody, I mean, we're already over time, but if anybody wants to ask a question, I don't know
Go ahead.
if anybody has a question. I don't know what happened to Wendy.
Yeah, I'm here. There was a really great question posed in the chat by Ezekiel Easy Allen. He asked, is there an overarching organization / association that brings all this rich history into one village?
Well, we have the Florida Black Historical Research.
The Heart of Boynton.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh.
Go
I guess
ahead.
y'all can put it.
Yeah. Okay. The Heart of Boynton.
Okay.
In Boynton, and for us, it's the Florida Black Historical Research Project. And maybe you could put it in the chat, or I don't know.
Yeah, I can add that.
Then we have the Heart of Boynton Neighborhood Association. It's basically 4 different Black communities, but it's 4 different Black communities, if you can still hear me.
Mm-hmm.
And this is part of the things that we put on. We put on festivals, we put shows, and so this all comes out of the Heart of Boynton, which actually came out of Black Awareness Day, which came out of a tragedy that happened, and we all just got together like Winnie and said, look, we as a people have to do something to make our community together. And so that's the Heart of Boynton Neighborhood Association. I'm the finance guy. So yes.
Are there any other questions that anybody would like to pose? You can write them in the chat. Okay, Kevin is asking, what year was the Seminole War associated with Chachi's village?
I think it was 1841. Pretty sure.
I believe that's when they built a military trail because they were trying to stop the Indians from escaping into the swamp. And so they built military trail, which kind of Chachi's village is inside of military trail, so they could actually hear them, And a lot of the people that came down, why lake work was so important, they go from there to the Bahamas, get food or live. So it's about an hour's boat ride from Boynton to Bahamas. So that was another reason why they built a military trail and why Chachi got caught.
And Dr. Wallis, you were saying that Chachi was an interpreter.
Yeah, he was. I'm not sure about. I think he did do some of that because, see, that's the thing. When you're getting this history from the perspective of the military,
Yeah,
and you don't know what they did to this man to make him do what
comply.
he
Yeah,
did. And
because do
they're
we know
not
how
going
he
to put
passed
that in the
away?
record. They're not going to put that we crushed his fingers or, his
Exactly.
toes or, or we took his wife or
Information,
his child, whatever, and did whatever. Well, we'll never know what happened with him, but he was
well,
living there, minding his
there
own
is the
business. We know
information
that.
that, hello? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello?
We can hear you.
The information that I found out about Chachi and his national Indian. Now, what type of Mexican Indian it was, we don't know. But when you think about the blacks, and when she was talking
Uh-oh. I think we...
that were already here, when you think about Mexico, you have to go back further than Columbus to see when Black people came here. Because I know some people know of Mansa Musa, and he did have an expedition. And around that time, Blacks started appearing in South America, and their influence started appearing in that same time. And there was a reference that they actually went to Mexico, and that's where they set up. And the Seminoles often traded with the Aztecs because we didn't have women. It was kind of rough living in Florida. So a lot of the trade prior to Columbus was we gave them trade and they gave us little short women from Mexico. So that's why a lot of our women are not as tall as the men. But also, even today, it's rough in Florida. I mean, it's even with the insects and the living and everything else. Men are kind of tough it out, but women don't tough it out. But from my reference, he was Black Mexican Indian, and that how he got there, we don't know. His wife was Spanish. He did commit suicide because his people turned on him, and his wife kept providing information, and they got something from the state, and she kind of faded from history, and people forgot about him. But he is a Florida hero because he helped the army, but he's a Seminole villain because he helped the army. So it's kind of, but his people didn't get sent to, I guess, out west. That was the agreement he had. He would help them if they didn't send his people out, but his people deserted. So it's kind of like, I helped you, but we didn't tell you to do that. So, that's what happened to them. And the actual, where I mentioned my aunt, is because in the books, you will see that they were surrounded by lakes and there was a corridor where they came through. And that's kind of like Okeechobee or Palm Beach Lakes. In that corridor, they came through and then they went downtown, and that was Chachi's Landing. And they just took it over, once the whites came, they named it West Palm. And
Okay.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I did want to share also today is a thing from Jane Landers. And it is sort of related to the subject of lineage, which very important to understanding the ancestral lineage of Seminoles and other indigenous groups in Florida. Is the following observation from Jane Landers. The interpreter Pero Bravo stated that once the Yamasee War began, Spanish prisoners and other blacks and mulattoes, as well as some Spanish women held prisoner on English plantations, fled to Yamasee towns and subsequently joined their exodus to Spanish Florida. This reference to Blacks and mulattoes, says Jane Landers, confirms Chief Jospo's testimony some 20 years later that Africans, like other indigenous groups, had been incorporated into the multicultural Yamasee Confederacy prior to their removal to Florida. Landers also confirms that over the last 2 decades, that was the last 2 decades in the 18th century, Africans and Indians reinforced their military, political, and socio-cultural ties, some of which had origins stretching back to Carolina, and they also formed families together. And I think it's important to understand that people don't want to really understand, is that the Seminole, whoever was a Seminole back in the 19th century is not the same kind of person who is a Seminole today, because the people were a confederation of many different groups of people, and mainly African. And that's a fact. Mainly Black anyway.
Okay, are there any other questions? I'll ask one last time. I think you've given us a lot to think about tonight, Dr. Wallis. I feel like there will probably be some questions that come even after this, because this is this history is we're a part of it. And understanding how to speak about it, I think, is really important. And that's something that's not always front of mind, but we need to start understanding the importance of the words we say affect how we feel about ourselves. And so we need to become more conscious of that. And I think, you mentioned that back in January as well. I think it's important to always remind ourselves of that we need to start getting used to saying enslaved rather than slaves, because that changes the whole context of how you speak about a people. So yeah, I think if nothing else, that's one place to start, is how do we speak about ourselves? Because I think something that's always interesting is we didn't get to name ourselves in any context. We didn't pick the name Seminoles. We didn't pick the name Yamasee, So we need to take some of that power back if we're ever going to be unified. I think it starts with how we speak about ourselves. So thank you for reiterating that, not just starting it tonight, but reiterating that message.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right, everyone. So this was our first Zoom presentation. And again, thank you so much to Dr. Wallis Tinnie and Mr. Victor Norfus for just accepting the invitation. So thank you all for being here. And I think this was an amazing start to something that I hope grows to become a very important part of our lives, where we get to discuss ideas. And I think the word tonight is unity, and to unify, amongst a common goal of uplifting ourselves and understanding ourselves better, so that we can be better for the future. So thank you. And this is recorded. So I'll be sending that out. I'll figure out how to send it out to everybody, and then we'll go from there. But thank you so much,
Can I say
everybody.
one thing?
Yeah, was that Mr. Victor?
Can I say one thing?
Sure.
Yes. A lot of times when I meet individuals and they have Indian heritage, they question themselves whether it's actual Indian heritage. My grandmother, who was captured as a Seminole, had 19 children that she was forced to have. My great-great-grandmother, who was Black and Iroquois, had 22 children that she had to have. And I'm the descendant of the white slave master, and he had most of the children. A lot of people don't understand that those children were gone, so they never knew who their mother was, so they never knew where they came from. All they knew is they were Black and they were slaves, but a lot of people didn't know that Blacks were Indians. So we have to open our minds and let everybody understand that his story is not our story. And we need to be able to tell our own story. And that's what I tried to do with Foundations of Faith. Cool.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And the conversation will continue. Good night,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Night.